Hey folks, Reliosity with Joe Mitlin. I'm Joe Mitlin. This is a short review of the ESPN 30 for 30 film about Ric Flair by Rory Kampf. I'm not really sure. Sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to mispronounce his last name, but Rory K. I'll just call him that. And really, really good. You could tell that Rory was a big wrestling fan. He wanted to delve into Ric Flair's personal life, not way too much, but wanted to get Flair to open up and do some great and give some great interviews, and he did. His book ended by 2 interviews, as he says in the beginning, 16 months apart, showing Flair before and after his, health scares that he had, which were terrifying. It's a great thing that Ric Flair's still alive. It's a miracle he's still alive after living his gimmick as much as he did, and especially the death of his son, Reed, in 2013. That no fathers had to bury their own son. And that part was really, really, really sad. That came towards the end, by the way, and Triple H even told some stuff about Reed failing some drug tests, and unfortunately drugs were what ended Reed's life, and it's just really, really sad. It's what got Ashley, aka Charlotte, into wrestling. So that was really, really cool. That was really cool how Ashley wanted to honor her. You could tell that Charlotte loved her brother, and she wants to honor him and stuff like that, and is doing pretty well for herself. So that's really cool, and Flair's proud of her, and that's great. But of course, it does start with Flair opens up in a lot of these interviews, and there's told through animations and stuff like that, like the plane crash that he went through, where it broke his back in a few places. But Flair opens up about road travel issues, living his gimmick, growing up, feeling that he disappointed his parents, who adopted him, by the way. Interviews from his past wives, a few of his past wives, including his current fiance, who was Fifi, on the Flair for the Gold segments. Interviews with Greg Gagne, Jim Cornette, Ricky Steamboat, who is an immortal and doesn't age, Baby Doll, Tully Blanchard, Marty Smith, ESPN, really cool. Marty Smith is a pretty cool personality to follow on Twitter. I believe I follow him. I don't know, I gotta check, but he's really cool. Does some really good interview segments. Talked about how he gravitated more towards Ric Flair than he did Hulk Hogan, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of people in the South did. A lot of people really appreciated Flair for what he was, and felt that he was a better wrestler than Hogan. Which, yeah, I mean, he was 50 times the wrestler Hulk Hogan was. I mean, I felt that Ric Flair was always better than Hogan, even though Hogan left a huge footprint in wrestling. For better or worse, he did, and I mean, no one could take that away from him. Even as much as Hogan tries to piss away his own legacy. But you had Michelle Flip-Flopper Beetle, still don't like her. I just never liked her anyway. She always struck me as disingenuous. Maria Menounos, who is a real passionate wrestling fan. Undertaker, this one shocked me because I actually got interviews with him out of his gimmick. That was pretty cool, though. He doesn't give interviews very often, but he told some good stuff about Rick and seeing his gimmick in the 80s. And it was pretty cool to get some insight from Undertaker. Arn Anderson, one of Flair's longtime friends, even if I think they had a bit of a falling out at one point. Jim Ross, Snoop Dogg, Sting, Tony Schiavone. This is the greatest interview in the history of our sport. Triple H, who told some pretty good emotional stories. And Stephanie, who existed and shouldn't be on TV anymore. Please don't bring her back to WWE TV. They're going to bring her back and we're going to hate it. She's not well liked. Why in the world would she be there? Goes through, nothing about this besides maybe some of the stuff about Reed Flair might shock you. But a lot of this stuff is stuff we already knew. Flair talking about being in Vern Gagne's camp. Ricky Steamboat and a few others. But Vern wouldn't let him quit. He saw something in, trained him the hard but the right way. Flair grew up respecting the business. It was cool to see footage of Ric Flair's first TV match. It was scary to hear about the plane crash. Miracle that Ric Flair survived. Some people weren't so lucky. Flair lost weight. Was able to do some great things. Be one of the greatest of all time. Not the greatest of all time. I mean, Ric Flair may be the most entertaining wrestler of all time. He's one of the greatest professional wrestlers ever. But not my favorite ever. He's top 5, don't get me wrong. He's top 5. For longevity and everything, and I certainly, no one can take anything away from Rick working hard and everything. But they go through some of his rivalries. They also talk about how he took inspiration from Buddy Rogers and Jerry Lee Lewis with the woo, and Buddy Rogers with the flamboyant stuff. The in-ring style of the NWA WCW is far superior to the WWF. Nothing against the talent in WWF, WWE at the time, or WWF at the time and now WWE. But the NWA WCW talent was far better. The matches were a lot better. It's not that the matches necessarily sucked, but Vince was more the sports entertainment guy. NWA, WCW, Jim Crockett Promotions, and other NWA territories were more about telling real stuff and making it real and everything. The Dusty Flair feud, what can be said about it? They main event 2 straight Starrcades, had worlds of great promos, just so many great promos. Hard times, it's like Flair, of course, with his interviews to, I want to say it was to Tony Schiavone. My shoes cost more than your house. But Flair lived his gimmick like crazy. They talked about the Four Horsemen. Unfortunately, we saw pictures of Luger, who never belonged in the wrestling business. The Steamboat Flair feud, I always felt, was just slightly better work rate-wise than Dusty and Rick. And that's nothing against Dusty and Rick. It's not they didn't work hard. I like the Steamboat Flair matches better. And again, Steamboat is an immortal. It doesn't age. It's amazing that Flair is still alive. And I wrote notes, by the way, so I'm looking off to the side here. But Flair jumping to WWF in 91 was monumental. Winning the 92 Rumble. They didn't do Hogan versus Flair, which I think they should have, in retrospect. I think it's that Hogan didn't want to put Flair over. Even though he should have put him over. And Hogan trying to talk up how great Ric Flair is. I mean, look, I'm not saying that Hogan's the only person who was disingenuous in wrestling, but Hogan came across as a bit disingenuous in this. Because Hogan didn't seem to like to admit that Flair was a better wrestler than him. Even though it was obvious to anybody with working eyes. But Flair had a really good run in WWE after he went back to WCW, and WCW pretty much buried him. Especially after 97-98. Even with that great comeback that he had and, great ovation he got in North Carolina. They just buried him like crazy. I mean, Flair was wrestling people like Disco Inferno, and Disco was another guy who never belonged in the wrestling business. The Flair came back in 2001, had a really good run in WWE, worked with Undertaker, underrated match at WrestleMania 18. Probably Undertaker's most underrated WrestleMania match of his career. And Flair didn't have too many WrestleMania matches. In fact, let's see, 8, 18, 20, 22. He had 1 23 on the on the pre-show, and 24. Yeah. Anyway, so what a retirement for Ric Flair, though. I mean, that send off on Raw, the match with Shawn Michaels the night before, the Hall of Fame the night before that. It was wonderful. They do talk about Ric Flair's TNA run. It was awful, just awful. I know he had to earn money, but it was just awful because that's when TNA, now Impact Wrestling, really just fell off the map. Reed, whole sad stuff about Reed. It really was sad how his life ended. Charlotte making her dad proud and honoring her brother. It's great. It ended with some really good stuff, and Flair's obviously not passed away yet, thankfully. He's got many more years left. Flair should be remembered as one of the greatest entertainers of all time. And I mean, not just in wrestling, but in general. That man lived his gimmick. Maybe he doesn't as much anymore, but still lived his gimmick for 40 plus years. One of the greatest ever. So, yes, this documentary is well worth checking out. I don't know if it's on ESPN's website and if you can stream it for a price. It could be on Netflix eventually. If you can find it on YouTube and want to watch it, sure. But if it ends up on Netflix at some point in a couple months, a few months, by all means check it out. It is well worth checking out. If you're a fan of Ric Flair, a fan of professional wrestling, really worth checking out. Thanks, guys, for putting up with my voice, putting up with my coughing. Allergy City, bitch. It sucks. I took some stuff for it, but it doesn't always work. Anyway, for those of you that watched the Ric Flair 30 for 30, what did you think? Did you think it was good? I thought it was good. Again, besides the Reed stuff, nothing really revolutionary got revealed. It was nice to hear from Ric Flair. And hearing kind of an open saying like this and everything. So it was really good stuff. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you think? Like, share, comment, subscribe. Twitter link in the description. It's been Real Honesty with Jar Mifflin. I'm Jar Mifflin. I will see you soon.